The heart of ancient Rome stood a massive structure that symbolized both the glory and the cruelty of an empire. This place was the legendary Colosseum, the most brutal arena in human history. When people see the Colosseum today, they see beautiful ruins and imagine a place full of history. Tourists take photos, guides tell stories, and the massive stone walls seem silent and peaceful. But nearly 2,000 years ago, this arena was anything but peaceful. It was a stage of blood. A place where life and death were entertainment. A place where the roar of 50,000 spectators could decide a man's fate. The Colosseum was built during the reign of the Roman Emperor Vespasian and later completed by his son Titus around 80 AD. When it first opened, the celebration lasted for 100 days. And those 100 days were filled with unimaginable brutality. Thousands of animals were killed. Hundreds of gladiators fought for survival. For the Roman citizens watching from the stands, these games were thrilling entertainment. But for the men standing in the sand below, it was a nightmare. The arena floor was covered with golden sand. But that sand had a purpose that it absorbed blood. Underneath the arena was a hidden world known as the hypogeum, a maze of tunnels, cages, and dark chambers. Gladiators waited there in chains, listening to the roaring crowd above them. Some were slaves. Some were prisoners of war. Some were criminals forced to fight. And a few were volunteers seeking fame. Yes, some men actually chose to become gladiators. They dreamed of glory, wealth, and the cheers of thousands. If they survived enough battles, they could become legends. But survival was rare. Every time a gladiator stepped into the arena, he knew something terrifying. He might never walk out again. The gates would open. The sunlight would flood the arena. And two warriors would step forward. Each armed with different weapons. One might carry a trident and net. Another might wield a sword and shield. Their armor varied, but the outcome was always uncertain. The crowd screamed. The emperor watched. And the battle began. Steel clashed against steel. Sand flew into the air. Sweat and blood mixed together as the fighters struggled for survival. Sometimes battles ended quickly. One clean strike. One fatal mistake. Other times, the fights were long and brutal. Exhausted warriors circled each other while the audience shouted for more violence. If a gladiator was defeated but still alive, he might look toward the emperor. His fate depended on a single gesture. Mercy, or death. A raised thumb could spare him. A downward motion could seal his fate. Imagine thousands of people cheering for your death. That was the reality of the Colosseum. But gladiator battles were only one part of the horror. The arena also hosted animal hunts called venations. Exotic animals were brought from across the Roman Empire, lions from Africa, tigers from Asia, elephants, bears, and even crocodiles. These animals were released into the arena to fight hunters or sometimes defenseless prisoners. It was chaos. Roaring beasts. Screaming victims. And a crowd hungry for spectacle. Sometimes the arena floor was even flooded with water to recreate naval battles. Ships sailed. Warriors fought. And men drowned in front of thousands. For the Roman Empire, the Colosseum represented power. It showed the world that Rome controlled not only lands and armies but also life and death itself. But behind the glory was a darker truth. Thousands of lives were lost here. Fathers. Sons. Warriors. Slaves. All reduced to entertainment. And yet, despite its brutality, the Colosseum became the greatest symbol of Roman culture. Because in ancient Rome, the games were more than entertainment. They were a tool of control. As long as the people had bread and spectacle, they remained loyal to the empire. But something was changing. Slowly, quietly, the brutal games of the Colosseum were beginning to face opposition. And the arena that once symbolized Roman power would one day fall silent. But before that happened, countless stories of courage, fear, and survival would be written in its blood-soaked sand. And the legend of the most brutal arena in human history would live forever. But the darkest stories of the Colosseum were still yet to come. The crowds gathered early in the morning outside the mighty Colosseum. Vendors sold food, children ran excitedly through the streets, and citizens of Rome filled the air with anticipation. For them, today was not just another day. It was game day. Inside the arena, workers prepared the sand while soldiers guarded the gates. Deep below the Colosseum, in the dark underground tunnels, the real story of the games was unfolding. This hidden area was called the Hypogeum. It was a terrifying place. Rows of cages held wild animals that roared and scratched at the iron bars. Lions paced back and forth. Wolves growled. Exotic beasts captured from distant lands waited in darkness. Nearby stood the gladiators. Some prayed quietly. Some sharpened their swords. Others simply stared at the ground, lost in thought. Every man there understood the same brutal truth. Today could be his last day alive. Many gladiators were trained in special schools known as ludi. These schools were run by trainers called lanistas, who treated fighters like valuable investments. Why? Because a skilled gladiator was worth a lot of money. Crowds loved famous fighters. They had fans, admirers, and sometimes even wealthy sponsors. One of the most legendary gladiators in Roman history was Spartacus. But Spartacus did something no gladiator was supposed to do. He rebelled. In 73 BC, Spartacus and a group of gladiators escaped from a training school and started a massive slave uprising known as the Third Servile War. For 2 years they fought against the Roman army. It terrified the Roman elite. Because if gladiators could rebel, the entire system could collapse. Eventually the rebellion was crushed, but Spartacus became a symbol of resistance, proof that even in the most brutal system, courage could rise. Back in the Colosseum, the games continued for centuries. But not everyone supported them. As time passed, new beliefs began spreading across the Roman Empire. One of the most powerful influences came from the rise of Christianity. Christians believed the games were cruel and immoral. They argued that human life should not be used for entertainment. At first, these voices were ignored. The games were too popular. Too profitable. Too deeply rooted in Roman culture. But change was coming. By the 4th century, the Roman Empire was transforming. Christian emperors began to question the brutality of the games. Finally, in the year 404 AD, a dramatic event changed everything. According to historical accounts, a monk named Telemachus jumped into the arena to try to stop a gladiator fight. The crowd was furious. They stoned him to death. But his sacrifice shocked the empire. Soon after, Emperor Honorius officially banned gladiator combat. After centuries of bloodshed, the brutal games finally ended. The Colosseum slowly fell into silence. Without the games, the massive arena lost its purpose. Over time, earthquakes damaged the structure, stones were taken to build other buildings, and nature slowly reclaimed the monument. Yet somehow, it survived. Today, millions of visitors walk through the ruins of the Colosseum every year. They admire its architecture and imagine the glory of ancient Rome. But beneath those ancient stones lies a darker story. A story of survival. A story of cruelty. And a reminder of how far humanity has come. The Colosseum stands today not just as a monument of Roman engineering, but also as a symbol of history's most brutal entertainment. A place where courage, fear, power, and sacrifice collided. And even though the arena is silent now, the echoes of the past still seem to whisper through its broken walls. Because the most brutal arena in human history may be gone. But its story will never be forgotten. Before you leave, If you enjoy discovering hidden stories from history like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because many more untold stories from ancient civilizations are waiting to be revealed. And the next one might be even more shocking.